Good day, and welcome to a election special from Rand Swiss. I'm Viv Governor, and what we'll do is go over some of the important takeaways from last week's election. Okay, so for those that don't know, South Africa had an election last week, and the ANC basically lost its majority for the first time since democracy, basically in the 1990s. Getting 40% of the vote, the DA just about 20. The next party is the MK with about 15. The EFF came in below that at just under 10. And then we have the smaller parties, the IFPs, the PAs, the Freedom Fronts, and so on. Now, first, before I carry on, I want to say something, and I think we need to be, as South Africans, grateful for some of the things that have happened here. One of the most dangerous times in any country's, path after democracy, and we've seen this numerous times in places like, in South America, in Asia, in, Africa, and even parts of Europe as well, is the first election after, independence or democracy or freedom or whatever you want to call it, where the party that's been in power for a long time loses that power. And historically, very few countries have been willing, or very few parties have been willing to actually give up their power peacefully. The ANC has acted incredibly, in exemplary fashion. They've been, as good as you could have hoped for. Okay, Snowden has come out and said that people have spoken. He agrees with the voting, and he's lost the trust, and therefore he accepts that he's lost power. This is something that does not always occur. In India, we had Indira Gandhi declaring an emergency and, putting people in jail and doing a bunch of different things. In Brazil, in, Argentina, we've seen a number of different places where when a party loses power, there's been, really serious concerns about stability, etc. The fact that the ANC has acted in this way has made these statements. We in South Africa need to be cognizant of how lucky we are that this is the party that basically has ruled us. There's issues with the ANC. I'm not doubting there's corruption. I'm not saying that there hasn't been a great many negative things about them. But at this particular test, and they've passed it with flying colors effectively. And this, I think, is one of the most important tests, accepting an election result that goes against you. Okay, so that's number one. Okay, let's get into the nitty-gritty of what's going to be happening in terms of, the different possible coalitions, because now we're going into a coalition system. The ANC technically has now to do a minority government, but I think we're probably going to go into a coalition system and get a coalition together that's going to get to about 50%. Okay, what are the options? The options are basically the two parties that get them to about 50% on their own are the MK and the DA. The DA gets them about 60%. The MK gets them to the mid-50s. That's pretty fine in terms of maintaining basically the ANC's rule, obviously in coalition. The last election, the ANC was mid-50s. Okay, so at the moment, it does seem to be that the DA is the the front runner in terms of a coalition with the ANC. Helen Zille has come out, and she's effectively the leader of the DA. John Steenhuisen, obviously technically, but Helen Zille, I think, is like the mouthpiece, and she's obviously has a lot of sway in the party, and come out and called a possible EFF, MK, ANC coalition a doomsday coalition, and says that this will destroy the country. And you've seen, for instance, even people like Magnus Haystack, who last week were basically saying to the DA, don't you dare become a partner of the ANC, over the weekend saying, yeah, partner up with the ANC, because the alternative is worse. Yes, we have people that don't like the ANC who voted for the DA, but most people that vote for the DA would believe, I think, quite correctly, that an ANC teamed up with the MK, or ANC teamed up with the EFF, and MK or ANC, EFF, PA possibly, that would be the other option you could see out there, or IFP, would be worse for the country than the DA teaming up with the ANC. Just the outlook that you'd have. What would the ANC DA coalition do for the country, do for the economy, do for the markets? Now, you'd have a period of euphoria, irrespective of whether or not the DA is able to actually do something about corruption, do something about failing infrastructure, etc. Just if it is announced on the face of it, would be a positive for the country's perception. We would see the rand strengthen in all likelihood. We would see the markets rise, particularly felt, I think, in the following sectors. It would be banking, because banking and finance benefits from higher confidence, higher stability. And so banking would benefit. The next one would benefit, I think, would likely be towards mining. Mining has been an industry that's been under a great deal of pressure recently, not just with regards to things like BE and other issues, but also with regards to, just the inability to ship stuff to the ports. I mean, the transport system, Transnet, has been, in rapid decline over the last couple of years. In many ways, it's worse than ESCOM. We just don't see it as a general public, because when you have load shedding, you feel load shedding. If you don't if you have a railway line not working, unless you basically are shipping on the railway line, you don't really feel it in South Africa. Okay, so that is the next thing. Mining would be positively affected. And I think we've also probably seen a knock-on effect on SA Inc. stocks, like the retailers and so on. If you looked at where it really was punished on, Thursday when the first results are coming out, those companies would probably be doing the best. Should there be a DAANC coalition? Whether or not this lasts, we don't know. Ramaphosa, if you remember that, was a thing, but there was such internal rot in the ANC that it was impossible for the change in the top leadership to fully, change the corruption in the party and the country, and that obviously meant that Ramaphosa, not only was he not successful in turning things around, his own reputation was damaged by the failure, and that could be a possible thing for the DA as well. If they join up with the ANC and they don't, make significant changes, or at least are not perceived to make significant changes to the state of the country, it could negatively hurt, it could impact them in the next election after this. And this is not some kind of speculation here. There's been a number of parties that have teamed up with the ANC over the last couple of decades. Obviously the initial one was NMP, National Party. Where's that? And more recently, an example would be Good with Patricia de Lille. I don't think she even made one. I'm not sure the last thing, but last time I checked, she wasn't even making one seat in the National Assembly. So it is possible that teaming up with the ANC could be the death knell for the DA, because it could basically destroy them as a credible opposition in the country. But that being said, at least initially, it would be very positive. What are the other options? The other options are, like I said, the ANC MK. What would that require? Now, this, I think, is one of the more dangerous options out there. And the reason is quite simple. Jacob Zuma has acted with, I'm going to say this, with willful abandon, or lack of concern for the future of South Africa. He's gotten under 50% in KZN. He's gotten basically like 15%, I said, in the whole national election. And these are reasonably good performances. I mean, it's quite possible to build a nice little, political fiefdom from that. Maybe even situate yourself for doing better in the next election, etc. That's not what he's doing. He's attacking the IEC, the Independent Electoral Commission. Understand what the danger of that is. If you attack the people that count the votes, it doesn't matter who votes. You can't trust it anymore. If you create a lack of confidence in the votes that are counted, that is the death knell for any democracy, because it doesn't really matter what happens after that. It doesn't matter if you have freedom of speech, it doesn't have freedom of anything. If you don't trust that when you put a vote in that box, it's going to be counted correctly, you don't have a democracy. And that's what he's attacking. And for the hope of having, as he says, a revote, another vote, that's not going to happen. And in fact, I've heard reports, I can't confirm this and I don't know for certain, there's reports that there's apparently beefed up security happening in KZN at the moment because of the danger of maybe some kind of civil unrest. We know that last time that Jacob Zuma was in a bit of a bind with regards to his prisoning. KZN went through some of the worst riots we've ever seen, certainly the worst riots we've seen since the end of apartheid. So yeah, it was a very bad time. And if he's willing to basically really push this line about the IEC not being trustworthy, that is the kind of line we're going down. And I don't see how you can be in partnership with a person willing to do that. That would be, I would hesitate to use some of the words being used, but a doomsday coalition, the ANC, MK. The EFF as the elder party in this particular thing, the EFF, MK, ANC will also be pretty bad, but it means most about the MK. If they don't have the MK here, the EFF doesn't alone have enough to join up with the ANC and have over 50%. So the option with the EFF has been the kind of anchor, getting the ANC to about just under 50, and then you need a couple smaller parties to get over 50. You could do it with one party, but that one party would have basically a veto and everything, because they know without their particular vote, you are not a majority anymore. So you'd want to basically get not 51, but 55 or 54, and that would require you to get a few other parties in line, That, I think, would be the second worst option after the MK. That would, I think, be or the second best option, how you want to refer it, after the DA-ANC coalition. The EFF obviously has some pretty radical ideas, but not as bad as the MK. If you had to look in comparison, some of the MK's proposals would be very negative for the country's economy, at least from my point of view, and definitely negative for the market. That's pretty much an objective fact. The EFF, I think, would have been viewed as being quite negative, but they still won't be quite as bad as the MK in terms of how the market views things. And then the final possibility would be some kind of coalition between the DA, the EFF, the MK, PA, Freedom Front Plus, those kind of guys together. Technically, you could have a coalition without the ANC. That would be well above 50%, and could, theoretically form a government. Unfortunately, or rather fortunately, I would say, in this scenario, these parties are way too different. There's no way you can have the the DA and EFF and MK and Freedom Front Plus in one party. It just does not function as a coherent political unit. So that is basically what we're looking at right now. DA, probably the way forward. If it does happen for the ANC, DA and ANC, the rand will strengthen, the market will strengthen, and it'll be felt in SA Inc. stocks, the banks, and also I think, not SA Inc. quite frankly, but also possibly one of the best affected sectors will be the mining sector as well. ANC, MK, really negative for the currency, really negative for the market, banks, and pretty much everything in the country would be negatively affected. That says Naspers, of course, because that's a foreign-based company. And ANC, EFF, I think kind of like what ANC, MK looks like, but not quite as bad. But still, weaker rand, weaker market, weaker SA Inc. stocks, weaker mines, weaker banks, etc. Okay, so that's it. If you want to basically see how well we did in terms of our predictions, you can go back and look, a few pages ago, when you'll see, our pre-election forecasts. And quite frankly, we got very close. We predicted the MK basically getting in a range that we got pretty close to. We predicted the EFF being below the MK. We predicted the DA being, towards mid-20s, maybe a little below that. And we predicted the ANC being around this level as well in our range in terms of what the ANC was doing. So we were reasonably accurate in terms of the margin of error for what we think is the final outcome. But like I said, there has been some surprises. Most notably is Jacob Zuma's willingness to attack the IAC, which I did not expect to happen. Okay, thanks for joining me, and I look forward to speaking to you again at the end of the week when we do our normal weekly wrap. Cheers.